The lobby of the Crestfall Grand Hotel in downtown Atlanta gleamed under the polished chandeliers. Marble floors echoed with the soft click of designer heels and the hush of conversations between wealthy travelers. Concierge staff smiled in crisp uniforms, and bellhops moved like shadows, wordless and efficient. The hotel catered to a very specific kind of guest, wealthy, white-collar, and polished. Anyone who didn't match that image was either serving drinks or carrying luggage. That afternoon, Devin Miles, a 32-year-old black man in a plain hoodie, dark jeans, and sneakers, stepped into the lobby, dragging a single hard-shell instrument case. His locks were tied back, earbuds in, and his eyes were searching for the elevator. He had just gotten off a cramped plane, taken a cab directly from the airport, and skipped lunch. The performance tonight was one of the biggest of his career. The Atlanta Jazz Collective's annual gala, hosted in the Crestfall's Grand Ballroom. Devin had been booked as the headliner months ago, invited personally by the event's producer. A solo saxophone set, an opening number, and a final improvisation with the house quartet. It was meant to be unforgettable. But before Devin could reach the front desk, a voice cut through the lobby. "Excuse me, sir?" The tone wasn't curious. It was firm, rehearsed. Devin turned. A white man in a Navy security uniform stood behind him, arms crossed, earpiece in, the name J. Richards stitched above his chest. Devin slid out an earbud. "Yeah? I'm going to need you to leave the premises. This area is for guests only." Devin raised an eyebrow. "I am a guest. I'm also performing here tonight." Security. Richards barely looked at him. "Sir, we've had complaints. A few guests were uncomfortable. You've been seen loitering, and we don't allow solicitation or unapproved street performances." Devin blinked. "I'm carrying a saxophone case, not a boombox." "You'll need to exit the building." Devin's grip tightened around the handle. "Check the ballroom schedule." "My name's Devin Miles. I'm the featured artist for tonight's gala." Richards gave a short, sarcastic laugh. "Right, I'm sure you are." By now, people were starting to stare. A couple walked around them, avoiding eye contact. A woman at the front desk shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Devin reached for his phone, his voice steady. "You're making a mistake." But before he could pull up the email from the event organizer, Richards stepped closer. "You can call whoever you need to, but not inside this hotel. Either step outside or I will escort you out." Devin looked at him, really looked, and realized this wasn't going to be a conversation. It was a judgment already passed. He exhaled slowly and turned around without a word. He walked out, the weight of the saxophone case heavier than ever. Behind him, the massive glass doors closed with a soft hiss. He stood on the curb for a moment, staring at the spotless facade of the hotel. He'd come to make music. They saw a problem. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that Devin Miles was not just any musician. And by the end of that night, they would all know his name. Devin stood outside the hotel for a long minute, the weight of humiliation pressing down heavier than his saxophone case. People passed him by without a glance, some dressed in cocktail attire, others stepping out of black SUVs with tinted windows. No one wondered why he was standing alone on the curb. To them, he was invisible. He could have walked away, found a cafe, called the organizer, and demanded an apology, or even turned around and gone back to the airport. But Devin didn't. Instead, he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. At the bottom of a recent email from the gala coordinator was a number labeled Event Logistics, Tanya. He tapped it and held the phone to his ear. "Hello," came a voice warm but busy. "Hi, this is Devin Miles," he said. "I'm supposed to be performing at tonight's gala, but I just got kicked out of the hotel lobby by security. I think they assumed I didn't belong." There was a pause, then a sharp inhale. "Wait. What?" "They didn't check my name. Just saw a black guy with a case and told me to leave." Tanya's voice faltered for a second. "Devin, I'm so sorry. That's completely unacceptable. Hold tight. I'll be right down. You're not walking through that front door again. You're walking in the right way." 15 minutes later, a side door near the service lot creaked open. A woman in a headset and blazer hurried out. She had a clipboard in one hand and fury in her eyes. "Tanya, you okay?" she asked. Devin nodded once. "Used to worse." Still shouldn't have happened, she muttered, then glanced toward the lobby. Come on, follow me. She led him through a narrow hallway meant for staff, dimly lit, lined with cleaning supplies and delivery carts, then into the gleaming belly of the hotel. He passed rows of banquet tables being dressed in white linen, tech crews adjusting lighting over a stage, and waiters arranging champagne glasses like soldiers in formation. No one looked twice at him now. They were too busy preparing for the star of the night. You'll warm up in the green room, Tanya said. We bumped your sound check, but we'll squeeze it in. And just so you know, she hesitated, the hotel manager will be informed, and so will the board of the Atlanta Jazz Collective. Devin gave a small nod. Thanks. Before she turned to leave, she added softly, I've heard your work, you know. You don't just play, you tell stories. Devin allowed himself the smallest smile. Tonight's going to be one they won't forget. As Tanya walked away, Devin stepped into the green room and gently laid his sax case on the couch. He opened it slowly. Polished brass, cool to the touch, the one voice he'd always trusted. He lifted the saxophone and held it to the light. In the quiet of the dressing room, he whispered, They'll hear me before they see me. Then he began to warm up, long, deep notes filling the air, like a storm brewing behind closed doors. The ballroom of the Crestfall Grand Hotel sparkled with elegance. Gold-trimmed chandeliers dangled above rows of round tables dressed in ivory cloth. Waiters glided across the floor like dancers, balancing trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne flutes. A grand stage sat at the far end of the room, spotlighted and silent, for now. The annual Atlanta Jazz Collective Gala was the kind of event people posted about for weeks. City officials, donors, and celebrities all attended in their finest. Every guest wore confidence like a second skin, and every act on the program had been carefully chosen, especially the headliner. Devin stood just behind the heavy curtain, his saxophone cradled gently in both hands. The murmurs of the audience buzzed on the other side. He could hear the MC wrapping up an introduction. And now, please welcome an artist whose sound is redefining modern jazz. A man whose music speaks louder than words ever could. Devin Miles. The applause was polite but uncertain. Most guests hadn't heard of him. Yet. Devin stepped out into the light. For a moment, the chatter continued, a few heads barely turning. Some of the guests sipped their drinks, only half paying attention. And then he began to play. The first note curled through the air like smoke, low, soulful, deliberate. It silenced the entire room. Heads turned, glasses stopped midair. Conversations halted. It wasn't just music. It was a presence, a confession, a storm that arrived without warning. Devin closed his eyes and let the melody flow, a slow burn of blues and memory. He didn't smile. He didn't perform for approval. He just played, raw, masterful, and absolutely undeniable. And somewhere near the back of the ballroom, Security Officer Richards stood by the wall. He wasn't supposed to be in the room. Security stayed outside. But curiosity had pulled him in when someone mentioned the headliner was starting. Now he stared at the stage in disbelief. That was him. The same man he threw out. The same man he didn't let speak. The same man he assumed was a problem. Devin's fingers danced over the keys, building intensity. The notes told a story of being seen too late, judged too soon. The crowd, once distracted, now hung on every sound. There were no lyrics, but everyone could feel the message. When he ended the song, there was silence. Then a wave of thunderous applause, not polite, not obligatory, earned. People rose to their feet, cheers echoed off the marble walls, and Richards stood frozen, his jaw tight, face pale. Devin looked out into the crowd. His eyes scanned the faces, some stunned, some moved, some now ashamed. And when his gaze landed on Richards, he didn't flinch. He just nodded once, not in bitterness, but in power. Because now everybody knew. He wasn't a trespasser. He was the main event. The final note still lingered in the air, like smoke, even after Devin walked off stage. Applause thundered behind him, echoing against the ballroom walls. But he didn't pause for a bow. He needed a moment to breathe. Back in the green room, his hand shook, not from nerves, but from release. Everything he had held in, every look, every assumption, every word left unsaid, it had all poured out through brass and breath. He sat down on the worn leather sofa, closed his eyes, and let the sound of the fading applause wash over him like rain. Then came the knock, a soft, uncertain rap on the door. Devin opened his eyes. Tanya's voice came through, careful. "Hey, Devin, you good?" "Yeah," he said, standing slowly. "I'm good." She opened the door slightly and stepped in, her expression somewhere between proud and angry. That was, I mean, you lit the whole room on fire. Devin gave a quiet smile. Felt good. She hesitated, then glanced over her shoulder. "There's someone here who wants to speak to you." Devin raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Before Tanya could answer, Officer Richards stepped into view. He looked entirely different now. No authority in his stance, no earpiece, no crossed arms. Just a man in uniform with eyes cast low, holding his cap in both hands. Devin stayed still, his face unreadable. Richards cleared his throat. "Mr. Miles, I didn't know. I didn't recognize—" "You didn't ask," Devin said, his voice calm but firm. There was a long silence. Richards looked like he was struggling to hold eye contact. "You didn't check my name. You didn't check the schedule. You just saw me and decided I didn't belong." Richards nodded slowly. "You're right. I judged you. That was wrong. I'm sorry." Devin studied him. No crowd, no cameras. Just the man, the truth, and the weight of a lesson slowly sinking in. "I didn't need your respect," Devin said finally, "but I didn't deserve your suspicion." Richards nodded again, quieter this time. "Understood." And that was it. No outburst. No vengeance. Devin simply walked past him, saxophone in hand, like a man walking through a door he'd already opened with music. He wasn't looking for revenge. He wasn't looking for applause. He had already been heard. And that was enough. The ballroom buzzed with energy. After Devin's set, the atmosphere had changed. Conversations were livelier, but also more thoughtful. Guests who had been on autopilot, sipping wine, trading pleasantries, now spoke with wide eyes and hushed reverence. Tanya found Devin backstage again, this time with a different expression. "Don't pack up just yet," she said, a gleam in her eyes. "Someone wants to meet you." Devin raised an eyebrow. "Another apology?" Tanya laughed. "No. Much better." She led him down a hall lined with gilded mirrors and velvet drapes to a private lounge area where a small gathering was forming. The lighting was soft, the energy intimate, and at the center of the room stood a woman in her 60s, elegant, poised, dressed in a navy blue gown that shimmered like moonlight. She wore pearls but carried herself like steel. Tanya leaned in. "That's Councilwoman Marin Ford. She's one of the major sponsors of the gala and a serious patron of the arts." Before Devin could say a word, Councilwoman Ford turned toward him with a warm, grounded smile. "Mr. Miles," she said, offering her hand, "you didn't just perform. You shifted the room." Devin took her hand. "Thank you, ma'am. That means a lot." "I've been attending this gala for 15 years, she continued, her voice commanding yet kind. "I've heard every sort of polished performance you can imagine. But what you did tonight? That was real. That was truth." Devin felt his throat tighten slightly. Praise was one thing. But recognition, real, knowing, sincere, hit different. "I appreciate you saying that," he replied. "I just play what I've lived." Councilwoman Ford nodded slowly. "Good. Then keep living boldly and keep playing louder. The city needs more voices like yours." She handed him a small, embossed card. "My office is hosting an arts initiative for underserved youth. I'd like you to be part of it. Paid, featured, respected." Devin blinked. I'd be honored." She smiled. "I know you would. That's why I'm asking." Across the room, a few other donors approached, waiting their turn to meet the man who'd turned an ordinary evening into something unforgettable. Devin looked down at the card in his hand. Just hours ago, he wasn't allowed in the lobby. Now doors were opening he hadn't even known existed. But the best part? He hadn't changed a thing about himself to get here. He had simply refused to be silent. The ballroom was dimming again. After dinner, Most events would have wound down, speeches wrapped up, dessert trays cleared. But tonight wasn't most nights. As the crowd sipped their final glasses of wine and murmured about the remarkable performance earlier, Tanya walked up to the podium and tapped the mic. "Now, ladies and gentlemen," she said with a sparkle in her voice, "we've received a special request." The room quieted. "One more time, by popular demand, please welcome back to the stage, Devon Miles." The lights shifted, warm and golden, as Devon stepped once again into the spotlight. But this time, there was no uncertainty. There were no half-hearted claps, no distracted glances. He was met with a standing ovation before he even lifted his saxophone. From the security guards lining the walls, to the waitstaff now standing still at the edges of the room, to the councilwoman seated proudly in front, everyone knew who he was now. Devon looked out at them, his gaze steady. He nodded once. Then he played. But this time the music was lighter, freer. Joy laced every note. It was as if he had shaken off the weight he carried into the hotel that day and was now floating above it. Notes danced through the air like fireflies. Melodies curled into harmonies, then burst into improvisation. The band behind him, the same quartet who had played with dozens of legends, followed his lead like they'd rehearsed for weeks, though it was entirely spontaneous. Devon wasn't just playing, he was conducting energy. In the back of the ballroom, Officer Richards stood frozen again. But this time, there was no shame, just awe. He wasn't watching someone he misjudged. He was watching someone he almost erased. And now, that man owned the room. As the final notes drifted into silence, Devon slowly lowered his saxophone. He didn't need words. The applause was louder this time, deeper. Not just clapping hands, but lifted hearts. Devon bowed once, not for approval, but in gratitude. Then he stepped down, handing his sax to a stagehand like a king passing his crown. Not because he was done, but because he'd already said everything he needed to say. The night had melted into memory. The ballroom lights were dimming. Guests slowly made their way toward the elevators or valets, still talking in hushed, reverent tones about the unexpected magic that had unfolded. Some clutched signed programs. Others took selfies near the stage, still stunned by how deeply the music had moved them. Devon stood near the back hallway, his saxophone case back in hand. His shoulders were relaxed, his expression peaceful. Tanya caught up to him just as he reached the service exit. "You sure you don't want to go out through the front?" she asked with a grin. "Might be nice to get the applause one more time." Devon smiled softly. "No need. I didn't come here to be seen." She gave him a quick hug. "Well, they saw you anyway." He nodded. This time, they listened too. As he turned to leave, the manager of the hotel, a silver-haired man with a forced smile, approached quickly, clearly anxious. "Mr. Miles," he began, "I want to extend my sincere apologies on behalf of the Crestfall Grand. What happened earlier was completely unacceptable and not reflective of our values." Devon looked at him calmly. "Then change your values." The manager opened his mouth to reply, but Devon was already turning away. From the lobby, Officer Richards stood watching again. No longer the man in control of the building, but a man who had just witnessed something bigger than himself. Their eyes met for a brief second. Devon gave him a slow nod. Not of forgiveness, not of approval, just acknowledgement. A reminder. You saw me wrong. Now you know better. Devon walked through the glass doors into the cool night air. But this time, he didn't step out alone. A group of guests from the gala followed behind him. Some stopped him to shake his hand. Others just smiled as he passed. One young black bellhop, who had watched the whole thing unfold from the shadows, stepped forward. "You changed something in there tonight," he said quietly. Devon looked at him, nodded once. "Now it's your turn." The bellhop smiled. Then Devon crossed the pavement, flagged a cab, and loaded his sax case into the back seat. As the car pulled away, the hotel, once a symbol of rejection, disappeared in the rearview mirror. But the music he left behind? It stayed. In the walls, in the memory of every guest. In the silence that follows, when someone realizes their assumptions just shattered. Devon didn't just play that night, he rewrote the script.